How are we doing, everybody? Welcome back into the SFS channel. My name is Gavin, and today we are kicking off a new series here on the channel for Dynasty Fantasy Football, calling it Dynasty Saturdays here. Every week for the rest of the season, my goal is to post some Dynasty content for you guys on Saturday mornings to get an extra in-depth look at these players from a long-term perspective on your teams. I said this in the running backs video. We're posting both today, but if you don't currently play Dynasty Fantasy Football, you got to get yourself involved. Take this opportunity while the season has already started to start learning and gathering information here, preparing yourself for next year's drafts, and we can help you set up a league and facilitate the organization of your first Dynasty League in our community Discord server, which can be found in the description of today's video. I'm happy to help you guys with that and want to get you involved in what I think is the most fun version and form of fantasy football. Once you go Dynasty, you won't go back. It adds a complete extra layer of depth and knowledge and fun here to fantasy football that I think you guys will love. So those of you that already play Dynasty, I'm sure you can preach this as well, and kind of ditto this for me going forward here. But I love Dynasty. You guys do as well. You're watching today's episode, or like I said, for those of you new around here watching my redraft content, this is what we're talking on Saturdays here going forward. So sit back, relax, and enjoy, you guys. Top 30 wide receiver Dynasty tiers here for this current point in time. Let's dive in. All right, as we dive into today's episode, I referenced this briefly in the other episode as well. So if you watch that one, you can skip over this here. But basically, I keep these tiers more generalized than I do for my week-to-week lineup rankings for 2022 fantasy football. The reasoning for that is that we have a lot more ranges of perspectives you can take here to value these players. We've got age, we've got current production, we've got situational analysis here. There's so much that goes into evaluating Dynasty rankings, whereas redraft, you're looking for the best options this week, and that's just not something you can clearly and concisely do here in these Dynasty rankings. So I'm just rolling with the S, A, B, C, D, F tiers. By no means are the D and F tier players bad. These are very valuable assets and guys you would like to have on your teams here, but that's just the way we're rolling in today's episode. So also move left to right with the rankings here. We're not going to have numbers up on the screen. I apologize. I just don't have the resources to edit that stuff in at this point in time. Time being the biggest issue here, but we can make that happen potentially down the road. So again, left to right for numeric rankings. In today's episode, let's dive into the S tier. All right, here we go. So Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase are the lone two players in this top tier. Now, a little bit of a flippening heading into the season. I had Jamar as my wide receiver 1 in Dynasty and Jay Jettis as my second player. Now, Jefferson's been balling out more this season. That's really the thing that has influenced this switch here. He's been the higher volume player. Now, they're both getting good looks, but 11 or more target games to start out this season. This is his third NFL year. It's like a 1A, 1B type scenario with Jamar Chase in his second season at 3 games with 10 or more targets. So a slight difference in overall opportunities. They're very different players, though. Jamar Chase is a bit more of a vertical weapon. Justin Jefferson's a bit more of an intermediate route runner that just fries dudes with his double moves. They're both awesome guys, played in the same college team together. Not too much more analysis is needed here. They are dominant alpha wide receiver ones at an extremely early point in their careers. All right, this is probably a fair time to bring this up in today's episode. So everyone ranks Dynasty players differently. This is an extremely subjective topic here, and by no means will I be offended if someone disagrees with my take here or views the way that I analyze this differently. Hopefully you guys enjoy and find entertainment in my perspective here, but I do place a great value and put a large emphasis on overall youth for these players. So you're going to see that in this tier here, the A tier, with Jalen Waddle and AJ Brown being ranked above Cooper Kupp. Now, if you're going in it for a championship this season, if you're trying to compete, by all means, the guy you want on your team is Cooper Kupp. This is the looking like back-to-back Triple Crown winner of the National Football League this year, and he's completely balling out and dominating. But what you've got is a 29-year-old receiver in the slot taking a lot of punishment from tackles. I mean, think about how many times we talk about a running back getting tackled and how many hits they take on a per-game basis, the reasons we don't like that. Cooper Kupp is seeing 15 target weeks out here, getting smoked across the middle of the field. So he's a tough guy. He's an absolute beast, a baller, all that stuff. But that's the reason he's our Dynasty wide receiver 5, as opposed to being a little bit higher here. Now, up to AJ Brown here, our wide receiver 3. I love his use in Philly right now. This is a 25-year-old player who is an absolute alpha wide receiver 1 for this team. They're using him in the short game. They're using him deep still as well. And Jalen Hurts has stepped up to the plate. Now, he's coming off of his worst game of the season right now, but through weeks 1 through 5, this is heading into week 6 here. We're posting this episode. I loved, again, what I've seen from him here. His athleticism is phenomenal. You've got basically basically everything you're looking for here. And again, it's a very young asset going forward that has a great deal of value to lineup. So that leads us into the Jalen Waddle situation. Such an elite athlete. If you take every player on this list and look at them from a physical lens, he probably checks more boxes to a greater extent than everyone, except for the fact that he doesn't have elite size. Now, this is basically as close to Tyreek Hill Jr. as you're going to get in Dynasty Fantasy Football, and that's his biggest problem for fantasy as well, is that Tyreek 1.0 is on his football team. So that's going to limit his consistency and dependability on a week-to-week basis to an extent. However, Tyreek is a guy in his prime right now. Jalen Waddle is going to be an appreciating asset here for years to come and one of the most lethal wide receivers in the league throughout that course of time. So he's just 23 years of age right now. Maybe I'm overvaluing him a little bit because of his youth and overall physical playmaking abilities. Again, not a 6'2" to 6'4" wide receiver that gives you that difference-making jump ball ability, but he can leap up there and win contested catches. Again, maybe he's the 1B option in his offense, but from a long-term perspective here, you want to have this anchor type of wide receiver in your roster. That's plain and simple my explanation for having him ranked so highly here. Again here, what you're going to see in today's episode is me placing a great deal of emphasis on youth and availability for long periods of time. The wide receiver position is so stacked and loaded with such skilled and talented players with immense ceilings. It makes these rankings very tough. So again, not offended if you guys disagree with me. Go at it in the comment section below. If you have questions for me, I'm happy to help and would love to give you insight on your guys' team. So CeeDee Lamb here. I was close to putting him in the A tier, but let's be honest. This is something we talked about this summer as well. He hasn't put up the numbers to deserve the respect to be there yet. Now, his talent checks the boxes. The draft capital investment from Dallas back in 2020 checks that box. We know he is supposed to be the alpha for this team, and he really is the alpha, but the numbers from a fantasy lens have not been elite. Now, part of this is Cooper Rush. I mean, Cooper Rush is giving him enough looks to be a fringe wide receiver one for 2022 fantasy football, but Dak Prescott even has struggled to really develop and produce numbers for CD on a consistent basis throughout his career. Now, there's been various elements from Amari Cooper, who's no longer in town, that have changed over time here, but for CeeDee Lamb, this is still more of a prospective upside play than anything at this point in time, because while the talent is there, the after the catch ability is there, again, the draft capital, the ability to be an alpha in your offense, he checks all those boxes. We just have to see that materialize here. Stephon Diggs, number 7 here. Remember, left to right for numeric rankings. This is a 28-year-old wide receiver at the peak of his powers, in the prime apex, whatever you want to call it, of his career. A top 3 route runner in this league today, and tied to arguably the best quarterback in football, if not the best quarterback for meeting Stephon Diggs' skill set. Now, what they've learned in Buffalo is how to use him all over the field and not just throw deep balls to him, and he is thriving here in 2022, being better than he was a season ago and getting his numbers back to those nasty, nasty numbers that we saw back in 2020. So for Stephon Diggs here, super high on him. Doesn't have all the time in the world here, but I wouldn't be surprised to get a few more great seasons out of him with the Buffalo Bills here. T. Higgins, number 8. The gap between him and Jamar Chase seems to be closing. Now, Jamar is still my second wide receiver in Dynasty right now, but T. Higgins is still such a physical beast. You got a 6'4" player who is phenomenal at contested catches, very skilled route running, can stretch the field. He basically does everything well here, and we see the value he has to the Cincinnati offense as they're going through a bit of a struggle growth period right now. When T. Higgins isn't out there, it becomes a disaster because they take away Jamar Chase, they being the defense, or they try to, and that really causes Joe to struggle and not really be able to go through reads the way he wants to, and he has awful protection, which doesn't help either. So we got kind of in the weeds there with that T. Higgins analysis, talking a little bit more situationally than I would have liked to, but a player in his 3rd season, extremely, extremely talented. I would like to see potentially some commitment from Cincinnati long-term to him so he can stay in the spot here, but he could go somewhere else and potentially land as the clear alpha and, you know, take his fantasy value to the next level here because we know that he has the talent too. DK Metcalf here, another 6'4" guy. He runs a 4.33 40-yard dash. What more do you want me to say? I mean, he's a 24-year-old wide receiver playing in somehow, some way, a Geno Smith-led offense that is the 7th highest scoring offense in NFL football right now. It's an outlier, but it's there. It's happening. And DK Metcalf shows you he's an alpha wide receiver. The target share is better than it was with Russell Wilson. And you're getting a guy who's just balling out here. I mean, who can stop this guy one-on-one on a deep shot downfield from catching a 60-yard bomb and absolutely torching the defense? So I think if anything, his dynasty stock has went up to start this year because I think we might have been situationally a little bit lower on him coming into the year. It's been a great thing, and I'm happy to see DK succeeding out there. Deebo Samuel coming from the same 2019 draft class. I should mention, both of these players just got fresh contracts, 3-year deals here. So the reason that Deebo is a spot lower is simply he is 2 years older, so he's currently 26. DK is 24 right now, going on 25. Deebo as well plays an extremely physical nature of football, basically playing semi-running back at times, the wide back role, if you will. So that, to me, might limit his overall longevity and ability to maintain explosiveness as a player over an extended period of time. But right now, Deebo Samuel is a fantastic piece for contending and rebuilding teams. I think he, opens up a lot of versatility in terms of the way that he fills a role for your dynasty roster here, and I love having him on teams. Tyreek Hill here, another extremely skilled player. Today is better than Jalen Waddle, who we have in the A tier. However, the reason I have concerns about Tyreek is that this is year 7. He's an extremely elite athlete. At what point, and I truly don't know the answer to this question, but at what point does elite, like world-class speed deteriorate? Is it age 30? Is it age 31? Again, I don't know the answer to that question. Everyone's body is different. We're seeing some players maintain elite levels of success for an extended period of time. Tyreek Hill is certainly a physical anomaly in terms of his explosiveness, the cheetah in open space. So that's the main concern for me. You've got a guy who I think right now is playing the best football of his life after the catch, at least with Tua to start this year, was doing just nuts things in terms of stretching the field after the catch. There's a play this past week. He didn't have the best fantasy game, but I thought he was dead to rights for a 5-yard loss behind the line of scrimmage, and he split the gap so fast, he broke a converging tackle from 2 defenders and jetted right through the middle of them and got a first down. I could not believe what I saw with my own 2 eyes there. Tyreek Hill is something to behold. And then Devontae Adams, he will turn 30 during this NFL season. Plain and simple, this is a guy at the apex of his productivity. Now, not at the top of his fantasy value here from a dynasty perspective, because if you sold him when he was younger, you were going to get a higher package in return in terms of overall, get back from another team here. But probably a sell high if you're not contending for a championship in your leagues right now. Again, totally dominant player. Might have another great season or 2 in him after 2022. But again, in terms of shelf life, you would assume that you're going to start seeing a drop-off within the next 12 to 24-month period. All right, a smaller tier here, just 4 names for the C tier. Remember, these guys are absolutely phenomenal assets, so don't read into this as if you were getting a grade back from your paper you just wrote, as a student. So Amon-Ra St. Brown here. Why am I not ranking him higher? To be completely honest, I think that the main concern for me is A, this is a slot receiver role, and B, you've got a guy who I think over the last 6 to 8 game stretch of his elite levels of productivity. Now he's coming off of an ankle injury and had some down games, but the period of time from the 2021 fantasy playoffs to the first 3 weeks of this season, I think he may experience the highest trade value he will ever have here. The reasoning for that is you've got a guy who just had his team invest a first-round draft pick into Jameson Williams. Now, for those of you that are already freaking out, I am not saying that Jameson Williams is going to take away his opportunities. He's going to make him fantasy irrelevant, and he's going to totally crush his overall stock here. But I do think it's worth noting that he's a 4th-round draft pick, not super highly invested into by his football team. And we've seen other wide receivers in just different situations, but when they have an alpha step into their offense, which I believe someday Jameson Williams becomes an alpha wide receiver, you're just going to see a drop-off in production and opportunities in this offense. You can't sustain 12 target games with another clear dude in your offense. So for Amon-Ra St. Brown, again, he is super young. He's in year 2 right now. He's a really good slot option, a really good route runner, and the guy can play football at a high level. I just wonder at what point here has that value reached its apex, because like I said, he can continue putting up, fringe top 12 numbers for the rest of his career. I think that for 2022, he's an elite wide receiver here, but long term, once Jameson Williams finds himself, gets healthy and right in this offense, and I don't know if that happens this year because coming off an ACL is both a mental and physical recovery. So there's a lot of things at play, and overall, I just feel a little bit more comfortable with him in the C tier as opposed to up there with some of those other names there. Michael Pittman here, this is a really talented X wide receiver for this Colts team, a 6'4" body, really good after the catch, can win contested balls as well. They did bring Alec Pierce into the situation, another wide receiver that I really like as a prospect. And the quarterback situation is a bit sketchy right now. Matt Ryan, they might have another quarterback. What would it be? 3 quarterbacks in 3 years for Michael Pittman, which would be quite the thing to see. But at the end of the day, this is a talented playmaker, a guy who I think is, based off of draft capital investment. He was a high second-round pick. Should be a high priority for this team going forward. So Pittman, our wide receiver 14 here. Garrett Wilson, look, I think he's the best wide receiver coming out of this class. I know it's kind of an unpopular opinion amongst the Dynasty community. It's a paper-thin margin for me between him and Drake London. I just see so much elite body ability just in terms of his ability to control himself, run routes, jump up and make contested catches. He doesn't have the best frame in the world, I will give you that. His arm length isn't amazing. He's only 6 foot tall, and he's a rather thin individual at this point in time. He could bulk up a little bit more and use some more size. I've comped him a lot to Devontae Adams, but Devontae is significantly larger than him in terms of just his overall thickness as a player. He goes about 25 pounds heavier than Garrett Wilson, so a little bit of a discrepancy there. But at the end of the day, we will see. He was much better with Joe Flacco first and foremost than he's been with Zach Wilson through 2 games. It's a 2-game sample size here, but you would like to see him reestablish himself as the alpha in that Jets offense. And then you've got Drake London here, who is already clearly the alpha. So maybe we look back at this in 6 months after watching the whole season and assert Drake over him. But for now, I love me some Garrett Wilson. And you've got a guy in Drake London who checks every single box except for the speed category. He did not run the 40-yard dash, so that's still a bit of a question mark. You can see it on tape a little bit if I'm being completely honest. Doesn't separate at an elite level, at the NFL level. He's very good underneath and quick off the line of scrimmage. He's tough to tackle in space, but not creating wide open passing lanes for quarterbacks, if that makes sense. But at 18.1 breakout age, that's 99th percentile. He's got the size, the arm length, everything is there, the route running ability, except for that elite speed. So let's dive into the next tier here. All right, if you guys are enjoying today's episode, make sure to smash that like button as we get into the D tier here. Now, starting out with Chris Godwin, a 26-year-old wide receiver, another player that, honestly, if you want to look at this as a similar trajectory to Amon-Ra St. Brown, who we have in the C tier right now, he's got an alpha in Mike Evans on his team. And while Chris Godwin may get more targets in the offense, Mike Evans, aside from what was at 2019, has been the more productive option. Now, some of that's coming down to injuries and whatnot, but big slot players have a really good role to fulfill for fantasy teams. So hopefully Amon-Ra St. Brown can kind of follow the Chris Godwin path, but stay healthy here. Again, they're different players, but they play similar roles in their offense, if you will. So for Godwin here, though, back to him. He's been banged up the last season and a half here. Really, it's just been kind of a season because he got injured mid-year last year. But and the biggest question mark with a 26-year-old veteran wide receiver is quarterback play long-term in this situation. And for him, that's Tom Brady, a 45-year-old that we don't really know much about his future plans after this year. So that could impact Godwin. We are seeing more and more players that we think and prospectively think have poor quarterback play, a.k.a. Geno Smith and DK Metcalf producing. So some good news for him there, and we'll see what happens going forward. But for now, he is my dynasty wide receiver 17. Deontay Johnson is the wide receiver 18 for me. I think he's an elite talent. He's a phenomenal route runner in space. He's been so tremendous this year, and his routes have just jumped off the TV screen when watching him. But it's been quarterback play and lack of ability to get those numbers as a dependent player playing a position that needs quality looks from his, his counterpart, the quarterback position. So for Deontay, he just came off of a 13 target game, only 5 receptions though, in his latest contest against the Buffalo Bills. Hoping to see some nicer things from him. Again, I think he's one of the best wide receivers on the planet in terms of route running and overall natural ability, but the situation is tormenting him a little bit right now, and he is moving into his second contract here, so not nearly as youthful as some of the options above that we would have ranked higher or put that precedent there. Chris Olave next up here, the wide receiver 14 currently when recording this episode in redraft, was concussed though in his last game. We'll see if he can suit up this week and keep those numbers inflated. Of course, we want him to stay healthy though. 19.2 breakout age for Chris Olave locked him into a very nice percentile there in the 90th plus percentile for the wide receiver position. So you got yourself a guy who is very, very good at the college level, stepping right in here at the NFL level and putting himself on the front page of the Saints pass catching core. Now, MT's been banged up a little bit, although Olave did get a 13 target game with Michael Thomas out there on the field. Him and Jameis Winston have been clicking. He's been making plays happen. A 4.39 40-yard dash runner, and a guy who has been separating vertically as well and getting a really nice air yard share for this Saints offense. So love to see what I'm seeing there from him. Rashad Bateman, our wide receiver 20, really good player, just not in a perfect situation right now. Baltimore receivers are just hard pressed for quality looks and opportunities, and that's something we've seen them struggle with here for, dating back to Hollywood Brown, who's going to be coming up here in just a minute. So for Rashad Bateman, again, super good route runner. Loved him coming out of college, but hasn't had more than 5 receptions in any game, I want to say, this season. I have to go double check that for sure. I'll be right back. I'll check that for you guys. My bad, y'all. He hasn't had more than 4 receptions in any game this season or more than 7 targets. So that is a bit troubling. Volume is going to be the issue for him going forward. But I do think, aside from Mark Andrews, he is the top pass catcher at the wide receiver position. Let's put that asterisk there because the tight end spot there by Andrews is a more valuable have right now. But as a player, his profile checks out very, very good. And he's a player you would like to have as a long-term asset piece. DJ Moore here, thankfully saying that DJ is only 25 years old, but is in a just awful fantasy situation right now. So hopefully going forward, this gets improved upon. Carolina looks like they're going to have themselves quite the draft pick this year, very high, because they've just been so awful to start this season. But with Baker Mayfield, it has not been the answer here. We're looking to greener pastures, hopefully. DJ Moore still got some time to get things back on track, though, being one of the best route runners and separators, a former high-volume player in 2021, 162 targets. So hopefully we can get back to that stuff, 28% plus target share numbers. Courtland Sutton here, this is a solid receiver, a larger possession player. Not the best separator in the world, but definitely has the frame to box out other players and make big plays happen. He's penciled himself in as the wide receiver 1 pretty much for Denver's offense to this point in time. I still think that Jerry Jeudy is the better player here, unfortunately. However, it's just not the way it's going with Russell Wilson right now, and as a result, you're seeing Courtland being ranked higher. He is still a 26-year-old player, so has some youth, obviously here, just getting into his second contract now after being extended. So for him, looking to move forward with him as probably a wide receiver 2 in dynasty lineups. He probably shouldn't be your team's top player. That's reflected in his 22 overall ranking for us, but definitely has value in terms of more value even than I expected coming into this season. Terry McLaurin here, Marquise Brown before him. I don't believe he is truly a wide receiver 1 on an NFL roster. I don't think he's an alpha wide receiver. I think he's imitating that right now for the Arizona Cardinals. Now, we saw him do that with the Baltimore Ravens for a handful of seasons, but he's a very, very elite number 2. So what I see here is a guy who physically just doesn't have the traits as a smaller guy to truly be that number 1 player, but in space, he's extremely explosive. Like I said, he can stretch the field vertically and make that deep ball happen, and hopefully he continues to thrive alongside DeAndre Hopkins. Now, maybe he develops and evolves his game here throughout the course of time. It becomes a number 1 receiver right now. Again, though, you can't grow. You can't get taller in terms of what you bring to the table in that category. So again, having some skepticism in terms of his overall ceiling here on a consistent basis and in terms of a dynasty rankings perspective, but his week-to-week fantasy ceiling is rather fantastic. And then Terry McLaurin here. My issue with Terry is that he was an older wide receiver coming into the league. He's a 27-year-old player now, just turned 27, and time is running out. You've got another quarterback that looks like he's not delivering the highest level of potential numbers for Terry in lineups this year. And what that means is after this 3-year contract's over, he's going to be about 30 years old hitting the market. So I don't know if Terry ever becomes the fantasy player we thought he could be. A guy who runs phenomenal routes, has elite explosiveness downfield, can stretch the field and win in various ways, contested catches, simply just flying past you, all kinds of certain stuff. I don't know if it happens. They have a very small window of time to get Terry the quarterback he needs. Again, 3 seasons. Carson Wentz is not giving him the numbers we thought. I expected Wentz to be gunning that ball downfield and giving him big play opportunities and putting him in chances and opportunities to score. And as I said, that just hasn't been the case here. So interesting stuff to look at, but he has definitely been someone falling down the rankings as of late. Last up here, the F tier. Again, the F tier is still very, very good players. We've got ourselves Treylon Burks kicking us off at the wide receiver 25 spot, moving to Gabe Davis at the wide receiver 30 position. Now, for Treylon Burks here, this is a guy who's on IR right now. It's hard to get a look for him and really move him up or down the rankings just simply based on the fact that we have limited sample sizes of games and he never really broke out pre-injury. So coming into the draft, left, we loved him. We thought he's going to have to be very efficient with this Titans team. And, we've seen flashes of that usage so far and that potential A.J. Brown role for him going forward. So we're just going to have to see more games. Plain and simple there with Treylon Burks, but his college tape checked out very well. His usage, his frame, all that stuff is great. Devontae Smith here, fantastic route runner. Now, I don't think that he is truly an alpha wide receiver. I think he's more of a 1B option to A.J. Brown, and that's the way things are playing out here. Every once in a while, he'll get him and have more targets than A.J. Brown and have a very, very good game in terms of PPR, just getting volume heading his direction. He's had a couple of double-digit target games here through the first 6 weeks of this season, so super talented player. Very good for his size at winning contested catches as well. He's had a few nasty ones, especially against the Commanders defense. So, to pay attention to that, he's making plays all over the field for Philadelphia. Definitely exceeded my expectations for him to start this year from a redraft perspective. Mike Evans here, a 29-year-old wide receiver who is currently, again, I think the number one fantasy option in his offense. Now, you're getting kind of close to the end of the line here. You're expecting some drop-off within the next couple of seasons. Tom Brady's involvement in this team as well is something that is very, very important to Mike Evans' value going forward. So all things to keep your eye on here. Mike Williams, a 28-year-old receiver. So, keeping your eye on the fact that both of these players are named Mike Williams is something kind of fun here for today's episode. But you've got a guy who is a big playmaker tied to a great quarterback. Justin Herbert just got another extension. So looking at connection and, obviously being able to trace him back to this team for the foreseeable future, that's important here. You do have an aging Keenan Allen, so maybe has established himself by, next season in his age 29 year as the clear wide receiver one for this offense. A big playmaker, a boomer bust option. Again, not super valuable to rebuilding teams just because you've got later 20s guys here that are progressing towards the end of their primes, but still very, very valuable pieces to have. And finally here, Jerry Jeudy and Gabe Davis. Jerry Jeudy, I think, should be the alpha in Denver. I think he's the best wide receiver from a route running perspective. He's got higher draft capital investment. He had more volume than Cortland Sutton in the games they played together in 2021. It just hasn't worked out that way this year. It pains me. And Russ has been part of the issue as well. I think that, Russ is going to go with the football where he wants to at the end of the day, but it could have been better for Jerry potentially. Jerry also already got nicked up with a shoulder issue. So, again, I think he checks all the boxes. He had a great college breakout age as well. Again, middle first-round draft pick. He is a guy I viewed very, very highly, but at the end of the day, it's looking like Sutton is the more valuable have right now. And then Gabe Davis, this is a good player starring in his role, attached to a great quarterback. He's not the highest volume player. He's not the highest level of draft capital investment player here, a 4th-round pick by the Bills in 2020. He doesn't run the fastest 40-yard dash, just a 4.54, and he isn't the biggest guy. He's just 6'2", but he makes plays downfield, man. He is a big-time producer in some spots. Now, he is a spotty guy. He is streaky. You can make your case for someone else here to take in and step over him to take a spot. However, Davis is someone that for, until the contract runs out in Buffalo or they choose not to resign him, I think they'd be fools not to. He continues to be a valuable piece here. So as a dynasty wide receiver 3, if you will, in terms of our rankings for today, I think he's earned that much of a right. And we're entering into a Kansas City matchup where he absolutely dominated them and set a playoff record for total touchdowns scored in a game at 4. So, not trying to overreact to this stuff too much here, but Gabe Davis is a young, talented guy that definitely has value on the open market here. So there you have it, our top 30 wide receivers for Dynasty Fantasy Football as of week 6 of 2022. If you guys enjoyed, smash the like button, click the subscribe button as well, and turn the bell on so you're never late for a new piece of content. I posted my running back segment today as well. Check that stuff out, you guys. It's been a fun Dynasty Saturday talking through this stuff with you guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.